So I understand you've already had a tour of the museum, right? So you've kind of gotten into the flow a little bit. You've looked at the tricks of the trades. You've looked at some of the stories. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more in depth. And I'm going to talk to you through my own eyes, what it means, what it feels like when you are an operator overseas, operating clandestinely, undercover, and the kinds of ethical dilemmas that you have to grapple with on a daily basis. And so my intend my remarks kind of to open up the subject, to kind of provoke some thought on different aspects of kind of where intelligence can collide and create ethical dilemmas. And then I would like to open it up even more and to address your questions. And as Lucy mentioned, I have a very long career, a lot of experience. I like you, I encourage your questions, but I'm not willing to go to jail for you. So if I don't answer, don't be surprised. It just means it's classified. So just kind of a little bit of a background. I entered the CIA in a different time, in a different age. It was still during the Cold War, and it wasn't that the stakes were different. It was just that we had one primary enemy, and that enemy was the Soviet Union. And now fast forward quite rapidly, and you look at the threat matrix today, and it's quite diverse. And so the ethical dilemmas that I faced in my career actually kind of look simple in retrospect. And when I stand here today and the kinds of threats that that the nation faces. So we'll talk about that in greater detail. But I wanted to kind of, on the very basic level, intelligence work, as Lucy mentioned, it's illegal in every single country of the world, all right? You get caught, bad things happen. Not just to you. Let me tell you, third world jails, not a nice place. But your agents, they're lucky if they get shot quickly, that they don't waste away in these prisons, that they're tortured, that their family is arrested. So these stakes are quite high on the personal side, but also on more that nation-state side. When operations go bad between nations, it can lead to outcomes such as war or Cold War. There could have been sensitive negotiations that were going on that all of a sudden are scuttled because of a spy flap. So the costs are multidimensional, and it's something that as an operator, we are always considering whatever we do, any kind of action. There's always a cost-benefit analysis that goes on. And the reason why we do that is these are real stakes. And if it's not worth doing, why should you do it? In essence, that's an ethical question. Why should you put somebody's life in danger if you could get the information some other way? Why should you jeopardize state-to-state relations for an operation that's only going to have marginal impact on an intelligence side? So as an operator, it's one of the basic questions. You're sitting down, you're saying, I have a requirement. The President of the United States wants to know X. How am I going to get that information? Who has that information? Where is it physically located? Is it in this ministry? Do I know who works there? Do I have any chance of meeting these people? Will I ever be able to recruit somebody and get them to give me that information willingly? Because listen, people don't just wake up one Tuesday and say, whew, feels like a good day to commit treason. It doesn't work that way, okay? Operators like me, what we do is we take people down a path. And I want to use real words here because I want you to think about it in very concrete terms. We manipulate people to come to the conclusion of their own free will that they want to break the law in their country, to betray their organization or their country, and provide information, provide intelligence to us. So this kind of opens the big question is, can intelligence in and of itself, espionage, can it be ethical? When fundamentally you're manipulating people, you're stealing information, how does that square with who we are as Americans? Look, I was brought up the same way you do. You know, you have bonds of trust with your family. You don't lie to your parents, all right? You don't cheat, lie, and steal. We're taught to be upstanding people, and yet we go around and recruit young Americans to work at the CIA. After we clear them, then find out, we look a deep look into their backgrounds to make sure that there's no history there of relationships we need to be worried about, or drug and alcohol use, or arrest records. Once we decide that you are an upstanding American, then we tell you we want you to lie, cheat, and steal. Ethical dilemma. Now, for some people, it's more of a dilemma than the other people, honestly. There are some Americans you can never convince that there is any circumstance, ever, in any way, shape, or form, that the ends justify the means. All right? It is never permissible. It is counter to your core beliefs to conduct espionage. Now, there's a whole other group of people out there in the United States that believe differently. And our government is part of that organizational group that believes otherwise, but not in a blank check kind of way. During World War II, we stood up the office, not we, I was not around, I'm not that old, okay? But during World War II, we stood up an intelligence organization. We didn't have one. We started the OSS because in wartime, we felt that our soldiers needed to have better information for war planning so we could win the war faster, all right? Save more lives. So we stood up this organization. It worked fairly well during the war. We won the war. Yay, guess what? We dissolved it because Americans were saying, yeah, but like the Gestapo, we don't really want that. Who wants to live next door to one of those people who spy, your neighbors spy on you all the time? We have this deep built-in distrust of what the government might do to us. But at the same time, they kind of liked knowing those threats that were emerging before they hit you in the face. So having this inside information was judged valuable. So the United States rethought it all and said, okay, we are going to have an intelligence agency, but that doesn't mean we have to trust them. And so we created a whole lot of rules and regulations that are part of law, part of statutory law, that are also part of guidelines, that are part of executive orders, in order to create some limits on what we can do in terms of espionage. And one of the big difference was that the CIA has a foreign intelligence mission. It does not have a domestic intelligence mission. That's the FBI, all right? And so there's this big, huge wall that was put down between the two, so we never get in the situation of a Gestapo, having your neighbor spying on you for foreign intelligence work. So that's one of the checks. And there's a whole lot of other checks that we can go into if you're really that interested. But I mean, they're basically, these executive orders 23383. You will not conduct assassination operations, nor will you task somebody else to do it on your behalf. And lots of rules that you will not use certain kinds of cover identities, like the Peace Corps, because that could endanger our young Americans who are working overseas as part of the Peace Corps. Nor will you pose as a journalist, all right? So a body of rules and regulations have built up in order to create some checks and balances, and so the U.S. government can stand there before the American people and say, look, we're going to do this, we're going to conduct espionage overseas, but we're going to make sure that we do it in a responsible kind of way. And so that is how we, as a government, said, okay, we want to have intelligence, but we don't want to have, we want some limitations. So that's one thing, that's one way, that's how our government has addressed intelligence. But when you look back, that still doesn't really kind of answer all of the other questions. For example, I'll use a historical example because, again, I can use it without going to jail. During World War II, we had broken the German codes. I think if you had gone through the museum, you might have seen the Enigma machine. It's tucked away in the corner. That is probably the most important item in this museum. It's not a reproduction, it's a real thing. We broke the German codes, and it was allowing us to know in advance when the Luftwaffe was going to start bombing London or British, English cities. So Churchill, the Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, knew in advance which city was going to be a target that night. What do you do with that kind of information? It's your job as the Prime Minister to see to the safety and the security of your citizens. Do you evacuate the city? Well, you start evacuating cities just before they get bombed. You know, the Germans weren't dumb. They figured it out pretty quickly that we're reading their mail. So Churchill really couldn't do that without exposing that capability. What an ethical dilemma. Does he let his citizens die? Well, yeah, that's exactly what he did. And history will judge whether that was the right decision or the wrong decision. But he also did a few other things. The children were evacuated from the cities, moved to the countryside. All right? He could do that without exposing that capability. Also, he would preposition first responders. So after, they had this very elaborate wartime system of watching for bombs and then moving in for, as these attacks would take place, and then digging people out and getting them to the hospital. So he put extra resources there so they could respond more quickly. But still, that's a really kind of tough call. Now, you're reading those codes and you know what's going on. And as an operator, with that inside knowledge ahead of time, that's really tough. And it takes, there's a real cost to those kinds of things. Let's go to today. Ever you think about the people who command the drones that fly around over war zones and counterterrorism operations in the Middle East? Somebody's flying them. Yeah, they're oodles of miles away, but they're making kill decisions from a distance. We have rules of war, and these rules of war have evolved and have been enshrined. And we have broken through with technology into a whole new world because the rules of war don't talk about remote warfare. It's so much easier to kill somebody when you don't look them in the eye. It depersonalizes the cost of war. So how do we deal with that as a nation? Drones, they're so powerful, but are they ethical? That's a question we haven't really resolved yet. And for those people who actually drive those drones, this is a huge cost because they are making kill decisions every day. So that's just one kind of an ethical decision. Let me take it down to a smaller thing because it's just so representative of every single day you deal with these things. I had this case, and I was a kind of a young officer, and I was assigned in the Middle East, and I was assigned to meet with this guy who was, he was old. I mean, he was seriously old. He had been recruited during World War II. I mean, the dude was old, but he had this job with excellent access, and he to the highest levels of his government. And there was no way that we could ever be seen together and explain that away. So we used what we call as Tradecraft, ways we operate to hide how we do our job so we don't get caught, right? Because who wants to go to jail or get shot or whatever? So I would meet him in the dead of night out in the middle of the country. I would drive out, I would turn my headlights off after hours of checking, making sure I don't have surveillance. And I would drive to a particular location and pick him up for a very short meeting. Let me tell you, these kinds of meetings are adrenaline's like out the roof. It's, you get caught, you have so much time. I'm driving, it's not like I can take notes. I got to remember everything that's said. It's dark. I'm worried about the security of my agent. So one night I drive out, meet him. He's right where he's supposed to be. He gets into my car. We're going to have a 10-minute meeting. I drive on, we're talking, he's telling me about his security situation, and he's beginning to tell me about, giving me some of the intelligence that he has for me. And all of a sudden he stops talking. I reach over, it's dark, I can't see him. I reach over and he's slumped forward. He's died in my car. It's not like, we go to spy school. We really do have spy school. And you learn a whole bunch of stuff in spy school. I mean, oodles of how to recruit people, how to convince them to give them their intelligence, how to run clean operations, how to not get caught. But there was no chapter 25, para 3, footnote 2BA that said what to do when somebody died in your car in the middle of a meeting. All right? We expect our officers to be ethical people. We expect our officers to be able to make good decisions and to be able to think on their feet. So I have a dead guy in my car, and I have no precedence on what I'm supposed to do. Nobody's told me. It's not like I can phone home, all right? I'm in the middle of a clandestine operation. It's not like the movies where you just pick up your cell phone. No, that's not real espionage. So what am I going to do? Do I open up the door and just give him a shove? No! I am an ethical person. I like this guy. This guy had worked for the CIA for years. He deserves my respect. Yeah?
Did he die of old age?
He had a heart attack in my car. I assumed. Did I take him to the hospital? Security at hospitals, cameras, guards. I could take him there and our relationship will be exposed. And that'll have costs in lots of different ways. And the guy's dead. It's not like they're going to do a whole lot of good for him, right? So no, I don't take him to a hospital. Instead, I take him home. And I honk the horn and his wife comes out and she's a little confused and I've just got my total act. This man, he collapsed. He said, this is where he lives. Does he belong to you? And she's going, whoa. And I said, look, I don't want to get involved. Please take him. All right? So I could get out of that situation in a way that was respectful to him and his family. And I tell you the story because it's the small things that add up in the intelligence world. It's these small issues and that you have to continue to conduct yourself in a way that is ethical, a way that you can sleep all night long and not wake up with nightmares. That you can stand before your peers and you can stand before Americans and say, I did this for this reason and it was the right reason to do it, all right? Where we get into trouble is when we fail the front page test, front page of the newspaper. And I used to tell my junior officers this. I said, imagine what this is going to look like on the front page of the Washington Post. How will this be characterized? Will you be able to stand up and say, I did this for this reason and for this outcome, and pass the giggle test? All right? And if you don't think in those terms, because basically what you're saying is, will Americans stand for this? If you don't think about that, and you get an order to do something, and you do it, and then afterwards you think, oh my God, I just waterboarded somebody. All right? It's not just the guy that got waterboarded, but it's also you who have to live with that. And organizationally, an organization that has to stand up and say, yes, we support torture. And so we talk a whole lot about torture. It's actually come back up in the news again with our elections. And it's a question I get a whole lot. How can you, as a moral person, you claim yourself to be a moral person, support torture? Well, my response is, I don't support torture. I don't support torture because A, it's immoral, and B, it's bad intelligence work. There are others that have different views on this, though. And I'll tell you, here's something the Israelis are actually, they really kind of sharpened this point. What do you do in a ticking bomb scenario. In other words, what do you do when you have arrested somebody, you have detained somebody, and you know that he's running and knows about a terrorist operation, and if you can get that information out of that guy immediately, you can stop the death of your citizens. Basically, it's the same scenario as Winston Churchill and the Enigma codes, but it is in the modern world. Is it moral to torture that person to get that information to stop an operation that's going to kill people? That's a debate we're still having in our society. These dilemmas are based, the reason why we have a dilemma is there's no such thing as an absolute good and an absolute bad in the world of intelligence. We live in grays. And to be able to survive and live with yourself, you really need to think through these issues and decide ahead of time, based on your own moral standing, whether you're going to refuse an order. And in the CIA, just in case you don't know this, we're a line organization. If they ask you to do something and you say, sir, no, thank you, sir, you don't have a job anymore. But as Americans, that's our responsibility, is to preserve that integrity and that trust of the American people. So I have kind of drawn down, I have oodles and oodles of stories, but I'm going to let you draw them out of me, okay? So let's take your questions. You're going to work from the back, I'll work from the front?
Covered.
All right. Questions? Unless I bored you all to tears. All right.
What's waterboarding someone?
So waterboarding, I would like to say that I've never done it. I'll speak on a more clinical basis. So that is basically waterboarding is drowning somebody, and then at the last moment resuscitating them. It's a very effective method of getting somebody to tell you absolutely anything. But are they going to tell you the truth? Aren't you going to say anything that you need to say in order to stop the pain? And this is the problem with torture. When you're an intelligence officer, you want to gain I want your cooperation. I want you to give me your intelligence willingly. Because if you do it willingly, and I understand your motivations for giving it to me, I'm going to have more confidence in the basis of that intelligence, and I'll have more confidence when I give it to the President of the United States and saying, he said X and I believe him. But if I'm torturing you, you're going to say anything. How can I even use that information? I can't. And the CIA learned a painful lesson once again during the global war on terrorism that using torture produces bad intelligence. So it's not only immoral, it's just bad intelligence work because you don't get information you can use afterwards. And that's the whole point, get information you can trust and use. All right, another question.
She has so many stories, guys, like cool stories. Just got to get out of it.
You got to earn them, though.
Yeah.
Have you ever killed someone?
I love this. I always get this question. I never pulled the trigger directly. All right? Another question. Come on, guys.
What have you always wanted to ask a spy but never have?
Yeah, how often do you get to meet a spy when we're talking about? I thought I saw a hand over here.
What country in the Middle East do you go to?
Okay, let's have another question. This question over there. Like you, but sorry, it's classified. Mm-hmm.
Are the James Bond movies accurate?
Okay, like James Bond, I love it. Who doesn't want to be James Bond? The nice, great, wonderful suits, and then you get all these high-speed car chases, and then there's hang gliding into buildings that blow up. I mean, that's really exciting stuff. How sneaky is that? Really? I mean, if every time I walked in a building it blew up, would anybody invite me over? We spies, we spend an awful lot of time learning the tradecraft of being unnoticed, learning how to blend into our environment, learning to not look suspicious. We want to be in and out before anybody notices we were there. That's what we are, is we're sneaky. And this is why we use a tradecraft with we juggle identities, all right? Because we work undercover. And I want to, I might be running 4, 5, 6 different operations at one time, and I want to have different identities for that, just so I don't get caught and so I can keep my operations separate. But sometimes bad things happen. This world is really small. You have no idea how small this world is. I was once in Europe. I was on an operation. I was operating under alias. I was with this guy who knew me under alias. We were in an airport waiting for our plane to arrive so we can go off to do something. And I'm just kind of hanging out, chatting with him there as part of this operation. And all of a sudden I see this woman coming across the lobby area, and she's waving. And she's definitely waving at me. She's saying, "Oh, Barbara, oh, Barbara." I'm not Barbara that day. What's going to happen when that lady meets that guy? And she calls me Barbara. Who uses fake names? Spies, criminals. I don't want to be pegged for either one of them. All right, so I have a problem, and I got to lie my way out of it very quickly. So here, I'll give you a hint. The potty excuse. Very useful, always, because nobody's ever going to say, no, you can't go, because they don't want you to have an accident. So I use the potty excuse to get away from the guy. Excuse me, I'll be right back at the ladies' room. And I'm walking over to this lady. Now, I'm walking over to her, and I'm sure you meet people out of context, and you can't quite remember their names, right? That happens all the time. I'm looking at her, trying to remember exactly who she is, because it's rude not to know, right? But more importantly, I'm trying to remember who I am. You get one chance, and only one chance, to know your own name, all right? To know your own identity. And you have to be able to deal with these situations and lie convincingly so you don't look suspicious, all right? This is the real work of espionage. It's not the high-speed car chases. That means you're getting caught. That means bad things are happening. It means your operation has gone south, all right? That's not what you want as an operator. All right, another question.
So there are the times when it's exciting, but is being a spy kind of boring?
Yeah, so you never see James Bond doing paperwork, right? Yeah, listen, you spend a lot of time planning, and you spend a lot of time on security pieces for that real intense time when you're actually on point running the operation. But all of that other stuff will create a successful operation. If you don't do the other stuff, no successful operation. So is it exciting? Yes. Are there tedious parts of it? Yes, of course. I mean, having an argument up your chain of command why it's important to take down this terrorist because he's a bomb maker, all right? It should be a no-brainer. But you still got to make the good argument and convince the people, the powers that be, and get your operation funded and all that. So yeah, there's a whole administrative piece to that. But let me tell you, that half an hour on the street makes it totally worth it. There's nothing like the thrill. When you've gone black, you're meeting your agent, you know what the risks are, you have a limited amount of time, and you've got to have a successful meeting to get the intelligence that you need. So yeah, that's all totally worth it. And you know what? I'm not gonna kid you that every operation is like, so wowsy that you're saving the world. It's not like that. It's incremental, and but sometimes you really can see the impact right away. Once I stole a secret that was so important, it ended up on the president's desk, and he sent me a thank you note. How cool is that? Of course, that note is locked away in a safe in Langley because it's classified. This is the other piece of the intelligence work. Unlike James Bond, if I'm known, that's a problem. We work behind the veil. We don't want to be known, because if we're known, that means we're blown, and it means we're not operationally effective. Now, I saw a hand over here.
How did you start your career as a spy?
So So I'd like to report that, I was the person that outread, the girl that read Harry the Spy underneath the covers of the flashlight at night. Nah. Never even thought about being a spy. Never even dreamed about it. Never crossed my mind. So I am the accidental spy. I came in to the world of espionage in a different age. Nowadays, if you want to be a spy, there's this thing called www.cia.gov. You just send them your resume. Okay, it's pretty evident, the whole process. Self-select. When I joined, it didn't work that way. They found you. All right? And they found me because I had an interesting background. I was living and working in the Middle East as an archaeologist. And I was loving it kind of until I realized I didn't really want to spend the rest of my life in the dirt. And so I came back to the United States and started working on a graduate degree in modern political economy. And I was spotted by a CIA recruiter. And I didn't know it was CIA. And I went for my interview. You go to an interview, you put on your little suit, right? You your best behavior. I figured an hour of my time. I didn't really know what this was. It was U.S. government, but that was all. I said, okay, I can give you an hour of my time. 8 hours later, and after all these tests, unbelievable. There was the essay sections. Why do you hate your mother? I'm thinking, is she going to see this? And then there was the math section. I skipped it. I figured if they want a mathematician, they want me. There was the section, 100 questions. Would you rather drive a fire truck or work in a library? After 100 of those kinds of questions, I had no idea what I rather, but I didn't rather answer any more of those questions. Then there were the questions that I loved. If you were a cat burglar, and your assignment was to break into this office, it's in this office building that's on the 10th floor, and you could take 10 tools with you, what would they be? Now that was my kind of a question. I obviously went to town on that because they called me back, and this they, that I didn't know who they was, and went through more security processing, and then I was offered a job without knowing what it was, and I had to sign a secrecy agreement in order to find out what the job was. Can you imagine that happening today? It just would never happen. But once I signed my secrecy agreement, then they told me that they were the CIA and they were hiring me to be an operations officer, a person who recruits spies overseas. So I fell into the world's coolest job. That's how it happened. And they perfectly profiled me.
How much are you paid?
Yes, okay. So, this is a good question. Because I tell you, I talk about cover. When you work undercover, when you're undercover, you really have a cover job. You really do it. You get up and you go to work in your cover job every day. And then your spying job, you have to meld your spying job into your cover job. So anybody outside looking in, it just looks like you're doing your cover job. There's no more there. All right? Only you and your spy associates know what you're really doing. So it's 2 jobs, 1 paycheck. Guess which one? U.S. government one. Guess which one is always more? The other job, and you have to get that check back. So you're not going to get rich in the world of espionage, but if you're doing it for that reason, your motivations are all messed up, let me tell you. Because it's a tough job. You are married to this organization. You basically give up all your privacy. All your privacy. Okay? You have to be an open book to them. And in exchange for that, they give you their trust. What kind of? Then they still put you on the polygraph machine every 5 years or more, or less. But you have to really want to do this job, and your motivation better be because you want to do it for your country. All right? You want to be part of the national security team. How am I doing on time?
You got to get about 10 more minutes.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, I'm going to do here and then there.
What's the closest you've ever come to dying?
Being shot at. We spies don't work in garden societies. We work in dangerous places. We work in war zones. There's a lot of metal flying around in a war zone. So yeah, that's dangerous. I worked against terrorism for a large portion of my career. These are folks you do not want to bring home for dinner, let me tell you. When I would go out and meet a terrorist, I would make sure that my disguise was pretty damn solid because I don't want them to ever be able to pick me out on the street. They play for keeps, total keeps. So yeah, it's dangerous work. I kind of make light of it, but the stakes are high. I've lost a number of friends in the war on terrorism, and it's but I would say that other piece of it is that it's kind of like being a soldier. When you're in the battlefield, and on the battlefield, if you're worried about getting shot, guess what? You're going to get shot because you're not thinking about what you're doing. Same thing in the world of intelligence. Your brain has got to be forward focused on you're handling your security, but you have thought about all that, but that's not what you're focused on. You're focused on mission achievement.
Were you ever on the brink of disobedience, or were you always having full faith in what you were doing?
So certainly I had operational moments in which I had disagreements with my superiors. In those cases, you have to learn, you have to have faith in your judgment, and you have to have the personal capacity to speak truth to power. When you think it's a wrong thing to do, you need to speak up, even though you know there will be costs to the wrong thing. I once had this operation that I ran. It's a little bit long, but I'll try to condense it. I love it. This happens all the time. You get a phone call in the middle of the night. And I got a phone call in the middle of the night. I had to go in and to read something to my office, my clandestine office. And I had an immediate mission assignment that I had to go to another country and to find one guy. I had to find this guy. I had to positively confirm through biometrics it was the guy, and then I had other steps I have to take after that. So I flew to this country. It was a small country in the Middle East, and had a network there. I had a pre-existing network there that I activated. I began looking for one guy. Let me tell you, it's hard to find one guy like Saddam Hussein. Think about how long in Osama bin Laden, how long we looked for them. I found him. Some of it was like pure kismet, but I found him. And I did indeed confirm through the biometrics that he was the guy that we were looking for. So the next step of all that was, okay, great that Melissa, you found this guy. Now, what are we going to do? In many intelligence operations, you never have the entire picture. Not only because there's just mysteries in the world, but also your management doesn't tell you everything. You only know a small piece of what you're doing. I understood that this guy was suspected of being involved with the first World Trade Center bombing, and that he was somehow involved in the financial side of the bombing, of the attack. And that's why we wanted him. So I had to put together an operational plan to get him. And I knew this country very well, and I knew that there were a lot of sympathizers to Islamist extremism. And so I didn't feel that we could go through the front door. I proposed an elaborate operation that required using national resources, and then basically that we were going to get him off the streets in an extra legal way. So I sent my plan off to Langley headquarters, and I waited to get, this is talking about the paperwork part, right? Waited to get the answer. Well, meanwhile, and I didn't know this at the time, I found this out afterwards, the FBI, you guys heard that the CIA and the FBI don't get along? It's true. It's better now, but back then it's true. Meanwhile, the FBI really wanted this guy because they had a case that was going to trial in the Southern District of New York, and they wanted to get him to testify against Ramzi Youssef, who was one of the bomb planners. I don't know, but my proposal and the FBI proposal went all the way up the chain of command to the National Security Council, and they had a big fight about it at the highest level of government. I wasn't there. Nobody asked me to present my plan. Well, the FBI won the argument, and they stole my case. Took it away from me. And the FBI plan was to go through the front door. They wanted to go to that government and say, we know that so-and-so is in your country, and we would like you to arrest him and hand him over to us so we can render him to justice in the United States. And I'm shaking my head. Well, that's what happened, is they went with the ambassador and they made the demarche to the government, and the head of that government said, well, let us look into this and we'll get back to you. That was a Monday. On Tuesday, they're still looking into it. On Wednesday, nothing. So I got on a plane and I went home, and I told my husband, who picked me up at the airport, you know, when you're in this job, you can't talk about your job ever, even with your spouse. But I was pretty glum. He says, what's wrong, honey? And I said, I let a bad guy get away. I know it. And sure enough, the country tipped him off. He fled, and so he slipped through our hands. This guy, his name is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, as we like to call him today. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is the mastermind behind the 9/11 bombings. He is the guy who dreamed up the idea of hijacking multiple airplanes, and also the guy that dreamed about attacking the World Trade Center. So here's a case of an operation not going the direction you wanted to, losing the argument, but fighting the good fight, but also accepting the responsibility of, okay, and continue to work. So that's one of those failures I carry around with me, because if I'd gotten Khalid Sheikh Mohammed off the streets in 1996, I'm not saying there wouldn't have been 9/11, but I think it would have really looked different, all right? If I had rendered him extra-legally into U.S. justice. I think I may have time for one more question, or not? You have one or two. Oh, all right. I have two up here.
How does the job affect your relationships in your personal life?
Okay, and your question?
My dad worked at the CIA, and I just want to know, does everyone make fun of the SPOs? Because that's something he does.
So how does this affect your personal life? Maybe that's a better question for my husband. I have been married to my husband forever, right? But I will tell you, it's hard on marriages. Think about this, guys. Your wife gets up 11 o'clock at night and disappears. Gone for hours, maybe gone for weeks, maybe gone for months. Don't know. All you have is this phone number to call in case you need help. And never talks about it. Meanwhile, she's probably off in some hotel room, safe house meeting with some guy. That's tough on a relationship. So you have to have a lot of trust in a relationship. So that worked in my marriage, but I said a lot of marriages can't really deal with that kind of black hole of lack of knowledge that comes lack of trust. It will destroy a relationship from the inside. Plus, there's the other thing is, how do you have a regular family life? I mean, you were working all the time. I remember my husband and I, we took this vacation, and a beach vacation. It was great. My husband was so pleased because I'd canceled all our previous vacations because of work. But then we were on the beach hanging out, and I hear this guy talking down the way. And I speak Arabic, and he's speaking, he's got this accent. I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a Libyan. Libyans don't grow on trees, let me tell you. I mean, you'd never meet them. So vacation's over for me. I got a Libyan I'm going to chase. Huh? So it's hard on families. And then there's, having a family also, children, all that. That's a very much longer story. It's hard to manage that. But we make it work. Your first allegiance, though, is to the company. SPOs. Hey, listen, they keep you alive. You gotta respect them. The SPOs are the guys who carry the weapons outside of our secured facilities. 9/11. I'll never forget 9/11. Nobody will forget 9/11 that was old enough to live through it. But that was a moment when the plane went into the World Trade Center. I happened to be on the phone with somebody in New York, and I'm watching this on the screen at the same time. I knew exactly what happened because I've been working against Osama bin Laden since 1995. But when that happened, that was one thing. But then the Pentagon, and then the evacuation orders came that our U.S. government buildings had to be evacuated. Well, guess what? We don't leave. We don't abandon ship. That's not the kind of people we are. Nobody wanted to leave. SPOs came and forced us out. Full combat gear, ready for the next attack. And whether that was the right decision or not, there was a small cadre of people that did stay behind to secure facilities and to continue working, identifying what the terrorists were doing. Everybody has a role in the service, and so they shouldn't be demeaned. All right, another question. Oh, I answered them all.
Do you have an estimate about how many spies you would say are in the U.S. right now?
So you are in the spy capital of the world here in Washington, D.C. There are more spies here. I don't know. Somebody might be able to give you a number, and I have no idea where they got it because it's secret, okay? We don't advertise. I can't even tell you how many spies work out at CIA headquarters. That's a secret number. But this is where the action is. During the Cold War, it used to be Berlin. Now it's here. We got the Chinese spying us. We got the Russians spying on us. We're spying on everybody else. It's an equal opportunity. And it's kind of cool when you're walking around the streets in Washington because to be an effective spy, in other words, to live for the next day, one of the skills is you have to pay attention to what's going on around you. I'm really good about that. My husband calls it paranoid, but I have a different word for it. I'll be walking along, and all of a sudden, I know I'm in a surveillance net. You see it. And whether it's the FBI setting up on somebody or whether it's foreign embassies, because you can all of a sudden begin to see the telltale signs. So that's the cool thing about living in Washington. All right.
One back here.
One last question? Okay.
Are most of your operations like successful, or do you have like do you have like an estimate?
What's my score sheet? It's interesting because I don't even think about it in those terms, not in terms of numbers, but you tend to think about it more in terms of impact, things that you did that really made a difference, lives that you saved, intelligence information that you collected. And when I look back over my career, and there's an awful lot of sacrifices in a career, things, family time that's missed, that lies that you tell to your family. I mean, listen, when you live undercover, you're lying to your family all the time. There's a real cost to all of that. I remember once I came back for a family gathering, it was Thanksgiving. My Uncle Frank was there. And I had recently gone through a number of cover changes. And my Uncle Frank was looking at me and said, Melissa, what is it with you that you cannot hold a job? So you really didn't respect me. And at the same time, that was kind of cool for me because I didn't have to then talk about what a loser I am, okay? But that's a cost. And you look at your career over the whole breadth of it and you say, did I do more good than I did harm? On those ethical judgments that I had to make, in the summation, did it matter? Was the cost-benefit analysis correct? When you lose an agent, and I've lost agents, that's a life that was put in your hand to protect, to encourage. And when you lose an agent, you're responsible for that. Even if you didn't do it. Agents do dumb things, let me tell you, unbelievably dumb things. They get themselves into trouble, but still, they wouldn't be in that situation if not for you. So yes, looking back over the summation of my career, it's a good career. I did good. There's lower costs. Is it a career I would recommend to others? Yeah, it's not for everyone. But if you want to serve your nation, and you definitely want to live a life of high intrigue, you want to see the world, you like a little bit of risk, it's a good career. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, thank you, Melissa, so much. We really appreciate it. All right, now I'm gonna ask a question again. Who wants to be a spy?
The death and destruction.
It usually goes that way. It's interesting. And then you have one or two quietly pull up their hands.
They want to be a spy, but they know.
Yeah, and what Melissa didn't touch on is if you guys want to go into the field, she would be the first to recommend languages. Yeah.
If you're interested in a career in intelligence, it doesn't really matter that much what you study. You do have to go to college. You have to get good grades. If you're interested in foreign intelligence, there should be a foreign piece to that. So whether you study foreign affairs or whether you study foreign languages, or maybe you're a hacker, that's a foreign language too. You've got to have some life experience overseas. But let me tell you the other thing that's really important. You got to pass a background check. And what does that mean? No drugs. I'm not talking about a little bit of no drugs. I'm talking about no drugs, okay? No alcohol abuse. No arrest record. And when I say arrest record, you're sitting there, yeah, I'm a good kid. I'm never going to get in that kind of trouble. Well, yeah, because kids do dumb things, like go to parties with their friends, and there are other kids doing things that they shouldn't be doing, underage drinking, smoking, and next thing you know, the cops have raided the joint, and you're there, and you get arrested, and you now have an arrest record, and you weren't doing anything. So be smart about that kind of stuff. Don't get yourself into situations like that. So that's my word of advice. All right. Bye.
Thank you. You say it much better than I do.